Hello and welcome once again to Python with Obin Kujo. Today we'll be looking at for loops in Python. Alright, so for loop is actually a way to repeatedly execute a block of instructions for each item in a sequence. Now in Python, we've already looked at some data structures and data types, and we got to know that some data structures or types are sequential. And examples are list, tuple, strings, or rings. So these data types or structures allows us to use for loop to access each item within that sequence and perform some sort of instruction on each of the items. Now, as I was saying, most objects in Python allow us to iterate over each item in that. So when you hear the word iteration, is the ability to access each item in that sequence within that object. And a typical example is here we have a string. I've just declared a string, my string, and in that I have stored the characters Python. So to iterate means to be able to access P and perform some instructions on it, access Y. So access each character in the string and perform some kind of action or some kind of operation on it. In the next line, I have declared a variable called my dict, and it's a dictionary, and I have stored the key name, and the value for that is div, and then I have another key age, and the value for that is 56. So to iterate over this dictionary is to be able to access each value using its key. So I'll be able to use name to access div, use age to access the age 55, and then perform some sort of operations over it. All right, so this is the basic syntax for a for loop. So you mention the keyword for, then the item. This item refers to the individual items within that sequence, within that data structure. The sequential items within that data structure. So we say for every item in that sequence. So the sequence will be either a list, either a tuple, either a string, or a range. We say perform some sort of instruction. So we execute some sort of code. So each item, this code here is going to affect the individual items in that sequence. Now let us look at the typical example. So I have I've declared my list, a variable my list, and in that I've stored some numbers. So what this means is that if I say for item in sequence, I am saying for item. So this particular item, I'm referring to the very first number. So for each item in the sequence, so for 1, perform this instruction. For 2, perform this instruction. For 3, perform this instruction. So it picks every item in the sequence and then executes this instruction on that particular item. Right now, let's delve into Jupyter Notebooks to really get to understand the concept better. Right, so I have predefined to save time, I have predefined some data structures and types that I would want to use. So I'll just paste them in here. So I'm just gonna take this out. So I have I have created a list of courses, a list that stores string variables. So I have in the first sequence, I have Python, Power BI, SQL, and then advanced Excel. So I'm just going to use a for loop over this. So I'm just going to say for every item. So I can say for every item in the sequence. So that is the sequence. So in courses, then you terminate it with your colon just as the syntax. I'm just going to say just print that item. So I pick every item here, and all I want to do is just display the item. So I pick Python and I say, okay, print Python. So I come to this course, okay, for item, that is the next item in the sequence, Power BI in courses. So for Power BI in courses, go ahead and print Power BI. Then we come again for the next item, that is for SQL in courses, go ahead and print SQL. Then the next one for advanced Excel in courses, go ahead and print that. So let us just run this code and see what happens. So realize that we've been able to iterate to assess each item in the sequence and perform some sort of action. This time we just did a print statement. So I'm just gonna, let's see how we can. So that is using for loop to iterate over a list. Now I have another one that says course name, and the name is Python. There's a string variable. So I'm just gonna, let me stick to my usual convention of using one quote. Okay, so this is a string variable that stores Python. So we're going to run the same thing. We're going to say for item in course name. So for every character, for every item in this course name, go ahead, and I just want to, again, this time around, I just want to print it. Remember, this can be anything. So I'm just going to print the item. If we run this, we end up accessing. So you realize we're able to access P, then we printed it. We accessed Y, we printed Y, we accessed T in that order till we got to the very last item in this. Now, I want to just clarify this. This item here can be anything. Mostly, it is advisable to use names that are meaningful. So in my case, I would say, since I know this is a list of courses, instead of just calling this item, I can call each item in here a course. So a course within list of courses. So I could have just gone ahead and say for every course in the list of courses, go ahead and print that course. If I run this, I will end up getting the same thing. And in here too, I could have, to make it meaningful, instead of using item, I could have just said maybe for every character in course name, or for every letter. So for every letter in course name, just go ahead and print that letter. If I run this, I get the same thing. So I just want to clarify that this, after the for statement, you can decide to call it anything, but make it meaningful. However, whatever name you use in here is what you are going to call out in the instruction part. All right, let us look at how we can also, so this is a tuple. So we have a tuple of strings that stores some fruits. So we have orange, apple, pineapple, and then guava. So let's just go ahead and then say loop over this using the for loop. So I would say so as I said, using a meaningful convention, each item here can be classified as a fruit. So I would just say for fruit. So for each fruit in my fruits. So in my bucket, in my basket of fruits, go ahead and then print. Go ahead and then print each of the fruits. So you access each fruit, you print it out. So if I run this, I accessed orange, then I printed it. I accessed apple from the list of fruits, then I printed it. I accessed pineapple, then I printed it. So this can be any form of instruction. Well, I should prove that. Let me just go ahead. So this can be any, let me just go ahead and declare some variable and call it numbers. And I'm just going to assign some list in this. So some random numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right. So this time we are not just going to print, we are just going to perform some form of instruction. So I'm just going to use a for loop to iterate over this list numbers. So for every number, I'll just say for every number in numbers. So for 1 in numbers, for 2 in numbers. What do I want to do? I just want to go ahead and say pick the number. So if I access 1, which is this number, I just go ahead and pick that number, and I'm just gonna say square the number. Just to display that, I'm just gonna say print that so that we'll be able to see it. So print the number, the square number exponent 2. So we pick the number and we say, okay, pick that number and then to the power 2 and print it out. So let us go ahead and run that. So 1 exponent 2 is 1, 2 exponent 2 is 4, 3 exponent 2 is 9, in that order. So this can be a very complex instruction or code that we want to perform on each of the items. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how we can use for loop on range. So range are special functions that we commonly use to generate sequence of numbers based on the parameters that we want. And let's note that, okay, so let's go ahead and then let me show you how this is. So we have two ways to we can create range. So the first one, let me just type in this range, and then we have a stop. All right, so if I go ahead and I say for, let's say number in range, then I pass in a stop. So let's say 10, and I go ahead and say range that number. If I run this, I would end up getting some numbers 0 to 9. So what does this range then? What does it mean? So range 10 says that generate some sequential numbers starting from 0 up to 9. So generate 10 sequential numbers for me. However, note that just as we've encountered earlier, 10 is always excluded. So generate some numbers, some sequential numbers from 0 to 10, but not including 10. So that is what we are doing here. And we're able to use for loops to iterate over each of this range of numbers. So for loop is able to access each number and print it for us, each number. We could have done the same thing. We could have said print the square root, or let's say number times 10, and we run that, and we end up getting that. So range 0, range 10 will generate 0 to 9. So 0 times 10 will give us 0. Then 1 times 10 will give us 10. 2 times 10 will give us that. All right, let us look at the next range option. So we have a range, and this time around we are going to pass in a start and then a stop. Let's see how. So let's just go ahead and say for number in range. So this time we are going to say, let's say from range 5. So that is where we are starting, and we are going to stop at 20. Let us just print that. We say print number. So if we run this, we end up, so the start, so the very first argument is where we want to start. So we are specifying our start range, our starting range up to 20, but remember, not including 20. So we start from 5 and we print up to 90. So if you want to print up to 20, we can just increase this to 21 and we end up getting that. So when you use two arguments in a range function, the first one specifies the start and the last one specifies the stop. If you use just one argument, by default, the start is 0. And then the stop is what you specify. Now let us look at the last range option. So the last range option looks like this range. Then we have our start, and we have our stop. Then we have our step. So let's just go ahead and try that for number in range. So we're going to pass in 3 arguments. I'm just going to say in range, I'm starting at 5, and I'm stopping at 20, and I'm using a step of 2. And I will terminate that, and I'll say, let's just go ahead and print number. So if we run this, what is happening? So we are building sequential numbers from the range of 5 to 20, but after printing sequence, we are going to jump 2 steps and then print it. So I printed 5 because we started at 5. Then I jumped 2 steps, so 5, 6. Then I printed 7. 2 steps, printed 9. So that is how the range function works. All right, so the last thing we're going to look at, how to, I would say, let me just call it loop control mechanism. So we have three main control mechanisms that we can use to control loops. The first one is the break keyword, the next one is continue, and the next one is pass. So let's first of all look at the break. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and then use range this time. I'm just gonna say number for number in range. So I'm just gonna pass 1, 5. So we know we are generating numbers from 0 to 5, excluding 5. Let me just even make it 10. And then I'm just gonna say, I'm now going to use a condition and say if that number is equal to 5, I would want you to go ahead and then break out of this. So for loop is iterating. So we are starting to iterate from numbers 0 up to 9. But the moment we realize that that number is equal to 5, we break out of this loop. So we stop iterating over the range of numbers. So I'll just go ahead and print that. So I'll keep on checking, going through the numbers in the range, and I'll keep printing until that number is equal to 5, and I'll break. So let us just bring that. You realize we started from range of 0 up to 9. So we printed 0, and then we got 4. The moment we got to the next item in the range, which is 5, we check the condition and it is the same as 5. Therefore, we left that particular loop. So we break out of this loop. Let's look at the next one. That's the continue. So I'm just going to go ahead and to save time, I'm just going to copy this. We are using the same principle here. And we're going to say, okay, I'm just going to say continue here. Okay, so we are generating the same range of numbers from 0 to 9. And this time we are saying that if number is equal to 5, we have to continue. So let's print that and see what happens. So we kept moving on. The moment we got to 5, we continue. So continue just means keep that number. So when we realize that the range of number we are picking, the number in the sequence that we want, when it was 5, we just skipped it. So that is what continue does. So let's look at the last one. That is the pass keyword. Okay, so I would just say for number range health, I just want to pass. Now, what is happening here? Now, Python, the moment you start a for loop and you have this your colon, Python expects you to have some form of quotes down here. If I need, let's say I'm writing a very complex code and I know that I need some for loop, but I don't really know what to do with it in the meantime. If I leave this and I decide to jump into a new cell, Python is going to tell me an incomplete. It's going to throw an exception. So to be able to prevent Python to throw this error, the syntax error, we can just use the pass keyword. And if I run now, you realize that nothing happens. So basically the pass key statements helps us to avoid errors and then skip our for loop and later come back to that. So the pass kind of serves like a placeholder. Let me say it's a kind of a placeholder for future code. So we leave the pass in there and later come back to figure out what we really wanted to do with that for loop. All right, so that brings us to the end of for loops. We'll meet in our next section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.